Now, this segment is your general setup of the software. So when you launch 3D Max, they have all these defaults set up. So what I'm going to through with this is what I have configured, and you could either do the same thing or leave it as is. It's totally up to you, totally optional. So first things first, I live in the United States. I use the standard measurement unit system, and that's what I've always used. However, CAD data, all the files I get from my clients are metric, and that's typically how the world in design works is with the metric system units. So the way I have my 3D Max set up is visually I have the standard units, which is feet and inches, but behind the scenes I have it converted to metric, so that way it's always properly set up with all the CAD assets that I receive from all the vendors. So to do that, first thing you want to do is go to customize and unit setup. So right here, I believe display is set to metric or generic units. So I have mine set to US standard feet with decimal inches. And then default units is feet. This is under the display. Now, the trick is for system units, I have mine set to 1 unit is 1 centimeter. And that's what I have it here. So in behind the scenes, the actual system is metric, but in visually it's standard because me growing up in the United States, I know what inches, what 12 inches is visually I could guess, and then door height, things like that. When I do full CGI environments, this is just what makes my life easier. Each their own. You could either do this, or what you can do is visually speaking display units, change that to meters or millimeters, centimeters, doesn't matter. So that's what I use. And then now if you see, if you were to create a box, again, the trick is to work in 2 scale. So everything you always want to do, you want to keep it 2 scale. So if I do 7 feet, there we go. So that's 7 feet tall. So 18 inches for a wheel, 20 inches. Everything works perfectly if you keep it 2 scale. So that's the first thing that I do. The next thing is your grid. So what I typically do is I turn off the grid. I find them annoying, but I'll go front view, top view, and left view, and I just press G. That turns off the grid. In perspective, I typically leave it. Um, that way I know what my XYZ visual is, and then what I'll do is when I start working, I'll turn it off. So I usually leave it. The next thing you want to do is you want to press F10 on your keyboard, and that opens up your render dialog box. And right now it's set to scanline render. As long as you have the Corona Render plugin installed, what you're going to want to do is switch it to Corona Render, just like that. Now we have that set up. Next you want to do is press 8 on your keyboard. And these are just the things that I have set up with the way I like to work. Everyone has their own methods. This is the way I like to work. This is why I'm going through these methods. So what I usually do is change it to well, you wouldn't have it, so actually I'm going to leave that as is. So we're not going to do anything in the 8th slot. What we'll do is here under the camera tab, under the renderer, we're going to change this right away to use photographic exposure, ISO 100. We're going to do F8 and shutter speed is 200. And typically this is my foundation, this is what I usually use, and actually f-stop will do 5.6. That's kind of what I usually like to shoot at in real life when I shoot backplates, so that's kind of my go-to guide. So then what next thing we'll do is we'll check the bloom and glare. I love this, I love lens flares, I usually always keep them on. Then for scene, what we'll do is denoising. You want to do Corona high quality, that's what I usually use. And then afterwards, I think that should do it for now. There we go. And if you want, we'll go over the render elements later. So that's it in a nutshell. And now if you're using a backplate or if you shoot your own backplates, typically if you're full frame, you're at 1.5 aspect ratio. And if you do medium format, you're at 1.333. So what I'll do is 1.5. I'll change that right away, and then 7360 by 4912. That's my D810 backplate resolution. So we'll do that. Make sure that matches up so that way when I'm rendering high res for my backplates, it's apples to apples. And then once I have that set up, last but not least, what I'll do is I'll do Control S. And then here I'll save this as a file called max start. And what that does is anytime you open 3D Max now, you'll have all these things that we just configured automatically set up. And so for instance, let's say you create a box. See how we have a wireframe? If you don't want this to be a wireframe mode whenever you start, press F3 in this viewport, F3 in here, F3 in here. There we go. Make sure this is standard. So there we go. And then now what we'll do is we'll save that max start. And now if you go to File, Reset, click Yes, it's going to automatically load that max start file, but it doesn't open it. So what it does, it uses that as a template without actually working as a template. So now if we were to create a box, as you can see, everything's solid. So let's say, to give you an example of how it works, as you saw when we reset 3D Max, it was blank. So let's say we save this file as our max start file. So anytime we reset it, 3D Max always opens up these elements. As you can see, untitled document. So that's in a nutshell how you create the template. And so I have my own max start that I've created a long time ago. This is my go-to file. So I'm just going to reset it. And there we go. As you can see, I have my render engine now, of course, because I use V-Ray for all my jobs. That's what it's set to. But we'll be using Corona Render for the project tutorial. And then my output is 1.5, good to go. So that's how you typically want to set up your 3D Max for the first setup. So you want to make sure your units are whatever you're comfortable with using, and then you want to visually set up what you want these viewports to be when you start it up. So me, I don't like wireframes, so I turn that off. I turn the grids off, so it's very clean and very easy to look at. And then you save it as a max start, and that is our setup for the 3D Max basic setup.